In this age of new normal, online is not your only option. Because new normal means new learning modalities and new learning possibilities. Let Vibal make learning offline possible with Smart Class. Smart Class contains pre-made daily modules sequenced according to DepEd's budgeted teaching and learning calendar. Each module has a specific lesson duration and has day markers to guide parents and teachers in the asynchronous learning of learners. Inside the modules available in Smart Class, you will find the following elements. First, learning competencies are identified in the module openers. Kickstarters are available to test students' prior knowledge on the subject matter. This set of activities, found at the beginning of each lesson, may also serve as motivational activities. Parents of preschool to grade 2 students will also find notes to parents which contain tips and pointers on how they can guide their child while learning at home. Redefine your students' learning experience with the integration of augmented reality technology into images and illustrations available in Smart Class, making learning more interactive and exciting. At the end of each module, Long Quiz is also available to assess students' understanding of the lesson. Smart Class also features Wrap Up, a lesson ender activity that applies the constructivism theory of learning. In Wrap Up, students are expected to summarize the lesson on their own using a graphic organizer. You may also evaluate the quality of your students' learning by letting them practice their learning in real life through GRASP's formatted performance tasks. The content of Smart Class is designed for the entire academic year, and it is available for 5 major subjects. All aligned with DepEd's K-12 curriculum and covers the most essential learning competencies prescribed by DepEd. Secure your own copy of Smart Class before classes open. Contact marketing@vibalgroup.com to know more.
Good day, Kavibal, and welcome to our Reading Literacy webinar series. For the discussion today, the topic will be on the art of questioning, developing critical thinking at home. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions on the comment box allotted during the session and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. She is a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, major in English from St. Scholastica's College. Took her Master of Arts in English, Language Education, major in English for specific purpose, which she received an honors award an outstanding thesis and Doctor of Philosophy in Development Studies, specialized in internalization of higher education at De La Salle University. She taught at Chiang Kai-shek College, De La Salle University, and at present, she is the Director for External Linkages at National University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Glendora Chu.
Hello, Vival. Hi, YouTubers. Can you hear me? Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. We will be talking about important things for today. But before before anything, before anything else, like us to I like to apologize for the delay while we are trying to do to connect with you the prepared PowerPoint. But I don't know why it didn't work the way it was planned. So apologies for that. But right now, I want us to understand something about critical thinking and how do we develop it while staying at home. So there are a few things that I like to show you. I prepared something, but I'm kind of disappointed why I can't show it to you. So first, let us think about the word developing. All right. What do you understand about developing critical thinking? You've been hearing the word critical thinking for quite some time. And what is that you understand about developing? When something is developing, it's starting to begin to bloom and commence, right? So I think I prepared here an image. Okay, I don't know if it's visible. The host, okay. Um, it's an image that I like us to explore actually. All right, this is full of colors, different colors, and different shapes, sizes. So this is not mine. I just took it from the web, but I like us to understand the idea behind developing as we show this. Okay, as I show this to you. So when we start to think about developing, we are thinking about starting something. Now, but question is, when do we start? Okay, can we start critical thinking when we are already schooled? Right. So that's the first thing that I like us to, start with. Is it the school's responsibility for us to develop critical thinking? Or the so-called art of questioning? What do we understand about art of questioning? Just like what our beautiful host just mentioned a while ago. So what's art in questioning? Okay, so allow me to share my thoughts for this afternoon. So I have here, right, a question mark about critical thinking because one of the most important skills in the 21st century education is critical thinking. And I think since the time we begin the 21st century, we are already bombarded with a lot of training, seminars, um, insights about critical thinking. My role this afternoon is to simplify for all of us what really critical thinking is. And it's not basically coming from me, but what I did was to apply critical thinking skill in, searching through the net, getting into Google, trying to make sense out of what this so many materials are going to tell me about critical thinking. So let me put it this way. It's just a simplified way of understanding critical thinking. All right? Are we clear on that? Okay, now I like you to check on the following. I don't know if you see this on the screen. It's all about observation, analysis, interpretation, reflection, evaluation, inference, explanation, problem solving, and decision making. How are you with the following? So, in terms of observation, when was the last time you take a closer look, take a closer look of something, or really point your eyes to that direction wherein you are just thinking of that and trying to, take a look at the what's going on, and the details of what's going on. when was the last time you really, open your eyes that wide and open your ears that wide as well, and then listen really well? Or when was the last time you made use of your sense of smell, wherein you really try to look for something that you smelled, and you want to find out where where that thing comes from? So all these things that, or perhaps touch, okay, when you were trying to learn how to cook for the first time, and then you got burned on, or probably tumalsik yung mantika sa inyo, etc. So when did you really engage in such an observation experience or exposure? Do you know that as you do that, and as we um, mm, observe, we are developing, we are trying to um, put critical thinking into practice. Next, analysis. Okay, when we talk about analysis, when was the last time you really did, right? And you try to break down things into pieces. For example, an issue that you are confronted with and that you'd like to come up with a solution based on the way you detailed it down. So when when did you try to do that? When was it? Next, reflection. We've been doing a lot of reflections every now and then. I really um, think, I really believe that most of us are reflective individuals. Like, we usually devote some time to think about what happened, what has been done, etc., or what should be done. Those things that we've been doing fall under the category of reflection. And oftentimes when we do reflections, what happens? We get to realize something, we get to develop an insight, etc. So that means your critical thinking ability is on the run, meaning it's working. Next, inference. So what do we do with inference, and how do we infer? What do we get from inference or inferring? Basically, when we infer, it's just like making an intelligent guess. You just don't guess for the sake of guessing, but you guess because there are facts that you are looking at. There are data that you can use in order to come up with a certain conclusion or certain thought about something. It's not a blinded kind of guess, but it's more of considering the available information around you. That's inference. Then explanation. Okay, have we tried really to explain something that others don't understand? For example, at home, when your kids try to question you, or when your siblings try to ask you why things have to happen that way, and when did you ever try to explain to them on their level, on the manner that they will understand? That again is where you can see if your critical thinking is really developing or at work. And of course, you always see this problem solving and decision making. These are the critical areas that are um, actually achieved when we make use of our critical thinking abilities. Now, but along with this, with these big words, right? For us to understand and really grasp the idea behind critical thinking is something that we have to remember as well. There are certain hindrances, or blocks that stop people from really going through critical thinking. One of which is, when we tend to become very emotional, and when we tend to depend on what we feel. That's why some people are often caught saying, feel ko ganito siya, ganyan. So when we put feelings and emotions, sometimes or oftentimes when we've been doing it not just on an occasional time, but on a regular basis, like we become so emotional. Critical thinking tend to be totally absent from this situation. Means to say that we favor what we feel, and so the tendency for us to reason out or tendency for us to understand reason may be far from happening because we always listen to what we feel, and that hinders critical thinking. Next, when we become too emotional, we become too self-centered, right? When we become too focused on ourselves, on what we like, what we want, what we think, should we get what we think we are entitled of. Self-centeredness. So such kind of entitlement that you think you deserve, that hinders critical thinking. And um, I don't think that we should just let kids grow up in that kind of environment. Then, of course, we have the societal and cultural thinking, or when we become conform with, you know, ginagawa naman ng nakararami. So, di gawin na rin natin. So, that's societal and cultural. So, pag may problema, for example, PhilHealth, okay, there's such thing as scandal in PhilHealth. So, why did it happen that way? Ginawa ng maliit hanggang lumaki, something like that. So, if we tend to conform to such practices, then again, it hinders critical thinking. And if we are eyeing for 21st century people who will grow up in the 21st century, or the next generation, then today, this time is the best for us to understand these hindrances, because if we really grasp the importance of shooing away these hindrances as we train our kids to become critical thinkers, or as we train ourselves to become critical thinkers ourselves before we train others, then it's worth listening to this talk, right? And then there's such thing as bias, but there's an adjective that comes before it, which is unconscious. So what do we mean with unconscious bias? Hindi ka lang bias. Ibig sabihin, you're unconscious, but people know that you are biased, but when it comes to unconscious bias is that parang breeding yan. Pag hinga mo, bias ka na. So nawala na talaga yung critical thinking is totally lost. Then, selective perception. What do we mean with that? So you don't look at the whole scenario. You just focus on what you want to look at. So kung merong problema, if there's an issue, if there's a problem, you just consider one facet of the problem, but you don't consider others that may be affected because of that problem. Once that problem is not solved, and once that problem is solved, etc. So selective ka. So you only focus on what you want to focus on, but not that thing as a whole. So hindrances yan. So when there are hindrances to critical thinking, what happens is that critical thinking is not able to do what it's supposed to do kasi block na nga, right? Now, the next thing that I like us to understand is this. Ano ba talaga what really is the foundation of critical thinking? Kasi we've been reading a lot of references, a lot of books about critical thinking, even textbooks that, universities and even reference books are saying that these are all things about critical thinking. But where is critical thinking founded? Diba? Saan siya nagsimula? Kailan? Nung nagpunta ka na sa college, when you are already attending college, or when you become mature about something? When? All right. So allow me to share with you this one. Okay, so foundation of critical thinking, all right, is centered on language and comprehension. So let's go back to my original question. So kung language and comprehension siya, ang foundation ng critical thinking, if language and comprehension are the foundation of critical thinking, so when do we start developing critical thinking? Tama ba ako sa tanong ko? Am I right? Can you please validate my question? So when do we develop critical thinking if its very foundation is language and comprehension? So when? Ay, so ang ganda. Of course, kailan nga ba talaga nagsisimula yung critical thinking? So allow me to submit to you today that critical thinking, developing it can start as early as when our mothers conceive us in the womb. So from the very start ng conception ng tao, nag-start na yung development ng critical thinking. Example ng mga moms ngayon, yung moms-to-be. So, what do you usually listen to? Ano yung pinapasok mo? What do you feed to your baby through you? Nagsisimula na ma-develop ang critical thinking ng bata. So, if you are reading pieces of trash that you can't even validate, or palitan ko, if you are reading pieces of information that you can't even validate, then if you are pregnant right now, then I would like to say that your baby is absorbing it. So if you are naman feeding your mind and yourself with classical stuff, like you're reading pieces of literature written by great people who have changed humanity, or mahilig ka sa mga historical account or whatever na binabasa mo, or nagtatrabaho ka, you are using a lot of computations. The same thing are being fed to your baby. So I'm trying to suggest to you in this talk that, to answer that question of when do we start developing critical thinking, I like to believe that future mothers or mothers-to-be should consider that. So kung nanay ka na naman ngayon and you are raising an infant, sabi mo, paano ko naman yan i-raise yung critical thinking dito sa infant, di ba? No, observe your infant. So, di ba, kahit na instinctive ang motherhood, if you don't observe, it's still lacking. So you always check the baby because the baby can't talk. There's no language yet but the baby's language is limited to non-verbal, di ba? Hindi pa siya nakakasalita. Pero may language na, right? And babies respond like when she smiles at you, and when you smile back, and then you try to make different gestures. Yun exacto. It's a manifestation that there's already language and comprehension taking place. Di ba po? Right? So, gusto ko lang i-share yung isang quote dito. Sabi niya, kasi worth sharing. I don't know if you can read it. To raise a child, all right? Hirap. To raise a child who is comfortable enough to leave you, it means you've done your job. They are not ours to keep, but to teach how to soar on their own. I promise to share this PowerPoint to everyone who's in YouTube right now. This is really good. Sabihin mo, what's the relation of, why did you give us that quote? Author unknown pa naman. But because it is very important in critical thinking. Why do we have to learn, or why do we have to master the art of questioning? For what reason? For what purpose? Anong implication? What's this for? Why do we have to do all these webinars? Why do we have to listen to a lot of speeches, a lot of speakers? What for? Anong silbi, di ba? So, para lang meron tayong certificate, or para lang may magawa tayo na makabuluhan? But, yeah, fine. But can we not make use of what we've been, what we devoted our time to for this moment? Let's make use of it. Let's make the most out of what we get from this, di ba? So, bakit natin to dine-develop sa mga anak natin? Because we believe sometime soon, we'll shoot them like an arrow. So, if we are not able to develop in them, or if we are not ourselves, we do not become critical thinkers ourselves, what will happen to the workforce, to the people we work with? Para na lang tayo, most of us will become emotional, no? Focus sa sarili, we will no longer grow. Hindi naman lahat people, not everyone you work with or not everyone you come across with will like you. Ikaw ba yung mabubuhay? Will you become that person who would like to please everyone? Yung mga people, those people who like to please everyone, usually their critical thinking abilities are not at work. Kasi it's impossible that we can please everybody. No matter how good we are, no matter how perfect yung delivery natin, there will always be, sabi nila sa internet language, bashers. Pero bashers are not the reasons why we are doing this, or bashers are not there to disrupt whatever good that we think we can get out of it, diba? So, ano ba yung good na makukuha natin sa understanding really art of questioning or critical thinking? What really that is? So, di ba how to make your education work for you? So, if we believe that education can enlighten all of us, then edi ito, apply natin. Then let's apply all this, right? So, bakit ang foundation ng critical thinking is language and comprehension? Okay, that's another question that we can probably consider as we end this session kasi short yung time. But I like us to consider as well the 5 basic questions. Di ba we are talking about art of questioning? So in understanding more about art of questioning, usually sa mga magaling ka mag-argumental, like if you want to train your kids to become lawyers, encourage lang, hindi naman sinusubo mo na sa kanila yung gusto mo sila maging, because they have a right to. If you are raising them to become critical thinkers, you cannot push them to take courses that they don't like. Kasi nag-iisip na yan eh. Are you with me? So, I'm trying to simplify critical thinking and art of questioning and putting them into one. So, kaya nga ang title ng talk today is Developing Critical Thinking through 5 basic questions. Ano yung mga 5 basic questions na yan? After discussing with you itong mga things that we've been doing in terms of critical thinking, and then the hindrances, etc. I also like us to focus on the 5 basic questions. What are these 5 basic questions? Ayan. So, in everything that we involve ourselves with, ayan, maganda rin pag-aralan what are the issue and conclusion. Ang ganda nito sa, please try to apply it when in your family. So, usually if you have siblings or if you have kids, and then they're fighting, try to focus them on the issue. Why are they fighting? So after they fought, what happened? So let them go through the process of understanding what has been done or what had happened. Because it's training them. You're trying to help them develop critical thinking. So what are the issue and its conclusion? So kung may isang issue, stick with the issue. As critical thinkers, you don't put in a lot of issues in one particular processing. So kung halimbawa, in your workplace, there's a problem that has been brought about by a colleague, and it became an issue. Kasi, for example, nag-spread ng gossip, ng rumor. How do you handle that? Hindi naman pwedeng you just shrug your shoulder and you are all professionals and you just let her go just like that. So, kaya nga nagiging ganito yung kultura natin is because no one is really addressing the issue properly. So ano yung conclusion? Pag na-address natin yung ganung problem, for example, spreading rumors, or despite the fact that you are all professionals and you are colleagues, you are all teachers, tapos nagsubunutan kayo. So, what kind of impression are you giving kids? Or nagsigawan kayo? So, hindi naman natin sinasabi dito yung conformism. Ang sinasabi natin dito is letting your critical thinking work. So, ano pa yung for other questions? Diba? Sabi natin 5 basic questions. So, what are the reasons? Bakit nag-away yung magkapatid? Kailan natin yung pinroses? Why did you fight with your colleague? Why did you pull her hair? Or why did you hit him? Things like that. Yung mga may problema sa mga estudyante na problem kids sa classroom. When was the last time we really observed them or analyzed yung behavior niya for that matter? Or when we try to infer why is he acting that way? When? So applicable po siya lahat ng wala akong nakikitang aspekton hindi pwedeng i-apply yung critical thinking. And then what are the assumptions? Kasi when we are trying to become critical thinkers, hindi ka lang nakafocus sa isa. You try to consider all aspects of the issue. Issue lang for example, one issue, pero may mga links yan. Kaya nga, pag magde-decision ka, ini-consider mo, when it's time for us to decide, di ba, we consider, who will be affected, who will be benefiting, who will benefit from this, etc. Kasi, ganun yung holistic way of looking at things. Now, are there any fallacies in reasoning? Nako, yung fallacies pa lang, it's another talk kasi medyo mahaba-haba po yun. Pero let me give you one example for fallacies. Diba mag-election na naman. Usually, mudslinging is one of the fallacies that I'm referring to. Ano ba yung mudslinging? For example, parehas kayong kandidato. And then instead of talking about issues, you throw pieces of trash to your opponent during a debate. Nakikita natin yan sa politika. We saw a lot of that in politics. And that's a flaw in reasoning. That's why it's called logical fallacy. So when we try to argue, let's argue by using facts. Hindi pwedeng nag-argue ka lang, gagamitin natin mga chismis, rumors, etc. And then, let's take a look as well, how good is the evidence? Baka naman yung what you're saying is your evidence is not good enough, or perhaps the source that you have for your evidence is not really legit or credible or living out in integrity. So, ngayon, importante yan. Kasi in social media, di ba, we've been exposed to a lot of news, a lot of information, even claims. For example, yung a certain doctor in America who even went to Washington, D.C. and, rallied there about using hydrochloroxine or HCQ, something like that, as a prophylactic solution for COVID-19. That video went viral. So if you saw that video, if you are a critical thinker, what should have been your first reaction? Diba, to check if that video is legit. So nag-Google ka and you found out that it was indeed true, and you check who that person or who that doctor is, and you were able to see that really, indeed, she's a doctor, and at the same time, she's a pastor. So, marami kang malalaman simply because you inquired and you try to make sense of the info that you got. Hindi lang suddenly pinorward mo sa mga kaibigan mo. Marami pang example. A lot of us right now are resorting to, buying online. So marami rin naloloko dyan kasi For example, isang produkto na worth 2,000 plus. Ang ganda doon sa video, di ba? Or for example, makeup or yung pang ano ng buhok. It's so perfect when they are presented in the commercial, in the ads, in the video. And so you were enticed to order. Pero pagdating ng produkto sa'yo, once you receive the product, you are not satisfied because that is not exactly what you were expecting to receive. Now, ngayon, na-order mo na, anong gagawin mo? Right? So, may issue, may conclusion. Even if you rant 1,000 times sa social media, can you get your money back? Right? So, evidence is something that we also have to look at. Yung mga reviews conducted online, it's gonna help us as well as to how we can, really put our critical thinking into perspective. Kasi reviews, although at the back of our mind, siyempre we're saying that maybe they are paid or whatever, but I still believe that if you are resourceful enough and patient enough to find good reviews about things that you are about to buy or things that you are interested in and that you want to know more about, there are a lot of websites that you can check, provided you are patient, you are persistent, and you really are interested. Okay, so Helen Keller once said, people do not like to think. If one thinks, one must reach conclusion. And conclusions are not always pleasant. Yun ang sabi ni Helen Keller. So, I like to believe na maraming tao in our time, in our age, na ayaw talaga mag-isip. For example, di ba, COVID-19, MECQ, we are told to stay home. If there's nothing you do outside, why you have to go out? Di ba? But still, maraming tao lumalabas, hindi natin alam for some reason why they are out. That's one. Okay? So, they do not like to think eh. Kasi if they will think, they will not be able to go out. Tama ba ako? So, they just want to go out. For example, yung nag-open yung mall, you will be surprised that people go there without even really buying anything. So, what's the mall for? Ang dami-daming mall sa Manila. What's the mall for? What are these malls for? For shopping? For what? Okay. What are parks for? So if people will only think, okay, people will only think, definitely they will not go out because of the dangers of the pandemic or the virus. And conclusion is, okay, if they will think, it will always be pleasant. If they don't think, conclusion will not always be pleasant. Ano yung mga example ng hindi nag-iisip? For example, ano yung mga example ng hindi nag-iisip? When somebody is angry and then he just let his anger goes off. Yan, nawawala, di ba? Kaya nga yung iba, they resort to, over anger, resort to violence, to the extent na murder, di ba? Why? Kasi they just lost their ability to think. So the conclusion is always unpleasant. So nakukulong or whatever, nakuprosecute, etc. So I think tama naman doon si Helen Keller. Now, may mga nilagay ako dito that I put here some situations wherein you can check, okay, these 5 basic questions. For example, blended learning. What's the issue and conclusion in blended learning? Most of us are affected with this kasi first off, we have limitations. For example, internet. Not everyone can connect sa internet if it's an online stuff. So may such thing naman na asynchronous, you can access yung lesson in another time. But how? Alright, so ano yung mga issues concerning blended learning? Yung iba walang iPad, yung iba walang smartphone, etc. At marami pang iba. Ngayon, anong ginawa ng conclusion ng DepEd dyan ni Secretary Briones? Sabi niya, we can even use radio. For remote places, we can use radio. Yung mga LGUs na merong radio, they can use that. So that's a very wise move for an issue dun sa blended learning. Kaya nga yung education parang kahit na late mag-start, it's handled well by the department. At least yun yung sa akin, issue. Now, what are the assumptions there sa blended learning? Not all kids will be able to really learn kasi baka hindi sila focus or baka may iba silang gawin during session or etc. Diba? Ano pang mga ebidensya ng baka hindi mag-work yung blended learning? Yung anumang mga dahilan, yun nga, what are the reasons, walang cellphone, etc. Ano yung mga assumption na hindi mag-work? Kasi baka hindi sila mag-focus kung ano-anong iniisip nila during session. So, may fallacies ba dun sa reasoning ng blended learning? Wala naman kasi ang tingin ko naman is para sa nakararami yun. Kung yun yung issue mo, pero kung halimbawa, issue mo kung yung about blended learning na, for example, based on certain experience or certain example ng isang grupo, depende rin yun kung ano yung mga pine-present mong fallacies doon, etc. And of course, anong evidence ng blended learning na nag-work? Ang dami na, even before this pandemic occurred, there are a lot of countries applying blended learning na okay naman. For example, Singapore, nag-apply sila ng blended learning way before. Okay naman sa mga estudyante nila or in their citizens, di ba? So ano pa, example, wherein we can apply the 5 basic questions. Madami. West Philippine Sea, yung di ba, you've been hearing the arbitration ruling. Do we really understand arbitration in its truest sense? How come some people are so angry and so against China na hindi daw pina-follow yung rule, etc. Did we really look and study? Did we really study about what arbitration, what it means? Or sino ba yung mga member nung na country? Sino ba yung mga member countries? How come US and China are not members of that court or that particular group? So, marami nagpa-participate on something, talks like this, that don't really get the essence of what they're participating on. So, given the case, are they applying their critical thinking abilities? Are they applying the 5 basic questions? Right. I mean, PhilHealth scandal. Ngayon, no, naiinis tayo. Yeah, we're so angry. Yung mga magnanakaw like that. But come to think of it, nangyari lang ba yan kahapon or yesterday? No. It's been there. Pero how are we putting solutions into it? Tapos ABS-CBN, there are 2 factions. Yung walang kasalanan ABS-CBN, merong kasalanan ABS-CBN. But if you are a critical thinker, you will find yourself in the midst of understanding all the available information and find out ano ba talagang problema dun sa issue ng ABS-CBN. Wala ba silang kasalanan o may kasalanan sila? Ano ba yung issue? Next. Yung claim ng mga tausug sa Sabah is very important for our national, it's a national pride, it's being a Filipino. Kasi yung tausug mga Filipino yan. They're from Mindanao, di ba? So, how important is that? And you become interested. So, kanino ba talaga yung Sabah? Sumali ka na lang doon sa grupo, tapos nag-comment ka ng nag-comment without really understanding. Sa Malaysia ba talaga yan? Ano yung mga nangyari in the past? Yung final ni Diosdado Macapagal in the 1960s. So, have we Can we read that in our textbooks? Do we have that in our history books? The things that, our mga previous president na talagang nagmamahal sa bansa natin, the things that they did, nababasa ba natin yun? Are we reading that? So ngayon, because of our ability to, link with the net or the internet, I like to submit to you today that we will become more critical in terms of all the things that are being given to us through, this information that we get every now and then. We can now apply our critical thinking skills to see if what we are interested in is really worth endeavoring. Ano pa po? Meron ako dito, mga online transactions. Are they safe or not? Yung when you pay online, when you are giving the platform an ability to, really see what's in your account, etc. How safe is that? Okay, meron tayo, there's such thing as cyber security, etc. Or you can pay for Avast securing your data, etc. But how sure are you that they are safe? Yeah. Now, I have links here you can read. Enjoy reading Manila Times. Enjoy reading all about Mars and beyond. Kasi nakabalik na yung SpaceX. I've been excited about seeing people in Mars. I don't know about you, but it just excites me na in my lifetime, baka sakali, I still be able to witness how travels become possible to other planets, no? For me, that's phenomenal. And who knows, baka ma-experience ko pa yun, baka makita ko pa. And then, ito, parati nating naririnig, human rights violation, etc. Black Lives Matter, etc. No, tapos we tend to comment. But do we really understand? Diba? When we say, do we really understand? Do we really comprehend what the issue is about? And what's being argued? What are the reasons why people are mad, etc. And then, just to give you a little perspective about logical fallacies, ito yung mga errors in your argument. Not your argument, but this being able to spot, errors. It is being able to spot errors on the way we reason, on people's way of reasoning. Diyan makikita yan kung paano sila mag-reason. Minsan, one good example is if you're married, okay, you can check out the way your partner does give his or her reason when you are in an argument. Napakagandang example niyan. So ano yung usually na pinag-aawayan ng mag-asawa? And what usually pisses off somebody is a flaw in reasoning. Yung madaling magselos. Okay, wala namang reason, di ba? Bakit ka magsiselos? So, when we talk about logical fallacies, it's all about errors in reasoning. Minsan, hindi siya obvious. That's why you have to understand that this particular fallacy can invalidate our argument. So, pag may mali ka lang nasabing isa, mahirap ka nang paniwalaan as a whole. Kaya nga kung mahilig kayo sa politics, pag during election, just observe and find out ano yung mas nakakasira sa isang kandidato. Yung mas maraming hindi na sa kanya boboto, find out, observe. Total, that's gonna be few months from now. Lalabas na yan after this COVID thing. But again, as I said, logical fallacies is another webinar siguro kasi mahaba-haba. Madami kasi yan eh. Actually, there are top 10, top 15 logical fallacies na madalas magamit. And it's fun to really learn more on that. So, tingnan natin if Vival will give us an opportunity to talk about fallacies, no? We'll see. But in the meantime, as I end, allow me to, all right, just put in capsules what I shared with you for the past minutes, all right? First off, developing critical thinking does not start in school. Sa totoo lang po, we cannot give that responsibility to the teachers, to the schools. It's our responsibility. Lahat po ng tao, responsibilidad natin na i-develop ang critical thinking at home. So now is the best time kasi most of us will stay home. Most of the kids will stay home. And how? How to do that? Kung there are pregnant women watching, future moms, moms-to-be, right? Please start developing critical thinking while your baby is still in your womb. Yung mga pinifeed mo sa mind mo, sa heart mo, that's very important. Then, language and comprehension should be given emphasis in raising kids from 0 to 12 years old. Ano yung mga given emphasis na yan? Ano yan? Doing things together, that's one. Tapos, processing information together. Pag may nag-away, nagkagalit, or nagtampo, just don't shrug your shoulder and smile. Ay, babe. No. You process it. Because you want to raise him well. You want to raise your children well. So, you always process kahit na bagay. Right? Tapos, give them chance to solve problems, to make decisions. And you just don't solve problems right away. At sasabihin mo, hindi, ito lang solusyon dyan. No, you try to process it with children. Let them find in their mind ways by which they can solve an issue. Kahit na nasira lang yung toy, nabali or what, give them a chance. Paano yun solusyonan? Give them a chance to decide. Okay, for example, ask them, what do you want to eat today? They can give you an answer, bahala ka na mommy, but try to be creative and innovative by asking them so that you can get other answers than bahala ka na or then it's up to you. So maybe you can say, okay, what about chicken machado, or what about nilagang manok, or chicken stew. So instead of just saying, okay, so find out ways by which you can explore a very simple answer to make them speak more, to make them their language become more functional, whereby comprehension is given a chance to work. Okay? Tapos ano pa? Critical thinking has been developed with a good and firm foundation. So paano magkakaroon? How can we have good and firm foundation? Of course, ito yung sinabi ko na start communicating with your kids from 0 to 12 years old. Kung meron kayong anak from that falls under that category, it's your chance, guys. Don't miss it. So that when they reach 18 years old, you have done a good job. You've raised good kids kasi now they can think on their own critically. Right? Hindi na sila mauuto, hindi na sila maluloko, except na lang if they allow themselves to be really fooled that, right? Tapos ano pa? So hard to expect people to think critically or decide critically when they had not been raised in such environment. And lastly, developing critical thinking through 5 basic questions can be applied in both minor and major situations as early as toddler years. Okay, for that, I like to share the references I made use of. Ayan, nandyan po siya. And then a little picture here. All right, of a baby. And why is play important to a baby? Why? And when you do play with the baby, it's very important. Foundation years. And thank you, everyone. Again, my apologies that my presentation didn't show well on the screen, but it will be in your box, in your inboxes, and Dival will do it for you. Thank you so much. Ma'am?
Okay po, Doc Glenn. We'll proceed po to the question and answer po. Pwede po pa-share po na ating video po so our viewers could see. Ayan. Okay po. The first question po is from Miss Gay De Leon. I am teaching a subject reading and writing in grade 11 with a competency critical reading. What research should I give them to improve their critical thinking?
Wow, nice question. Maybe you can start giving them a research on the self. Like they have to observe, because observation is one of the foundations of research, being able to observe. So give them a chance to observe how they read. What sort of materials do they engage themselves in, or what interests them the most? So these basic opportunities can help them establish, okay, uh, their level of comprehension, their level of understanding. So in terms of having them do research, honestly speaking, ma'am, grade 11 is more of action research, trying to make research work, all right, in a situation where they are in. That's action research. So to answer that question, ma'am, please have them do a research work that is practical, that is something they can apply. That's what action research is all about. And I do not really suggest that you do theorizing in grade 11 or problematizing, because they may not be prepared yet for those high polluting research endeavors. But I really believe in my heart, my mind, that action research is the best for them. It's more practical and it's more meaningful. It's something that they can observe, they can do, they can work on according to their level. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you po, Doc Glenn. Next question po is from Miss Rosemary Amparado.
Hi,
How
ma'am.
can we assure learners not to feel isolated when learning on their own at home?
That's a very difficult question. Kasi, di ba, really, when they are on their iPads or when they are on their computer, there's really an element of isolation, ma'am. So, kung ako po sa inyo, if you were a mom and you are just staying home, it would be best na meron siyang time for herself or for himself and time for us, for the both of you to study. Kasi hindi naman po kasi talaga 8 hours nakatutok yung bata dapat sa lessons, di ba? Let's also be practical. Kung akong masusunod to, hindi kasi, honestly speaking, we cannot really totally erase isolation. Kasi hindi talaga eh. there will always be time for them to feel that. Ngayon, kung andyan naman yung guardian, yung parent, yung big sister, big brother, I think we can apportion or allot time. Example, 30 minutes for personal, then math, 1 hour, science, 1 hour, reading, divide natin into two, leisure reading and academic reading. Yung mga mahihirap. Like, for example, the classics. Kasi, kailangan mabasa rin nila yun eh. Usually, the classics, the words that are being used in the classics, hindi naman easy to understand. Pero dapat ma-expose sila doon. So, mga ganun po, if we are going to allot certain schedules for certain time or certain activity, I think it's gonna work. And even isolation can be handled well. Next,
Okay,
make
thank you
question.
po. Last question po from Miss Shelem Joy Mangaring. Paano o ano po kaya, yan po, paano o ano po kaya ang paraan ng pagtatanong ang gagawin namin para matulungan ang mga bata na mapaunlad ang kanilang critical thinking and reasoning?
Okay, mga tanong. Alam mo, ma'am, yung W questions, 'di ba? Yung who, what, when, where, how, why. Yun po, pwede nyo pong kasi sa dami ng minsan ng ginagawa natin sa classroom, no? As a teacher, minsan gusto mo matapos lahat yung allotment. Minsan nawawalan na ng emphasis yung W questions. Pero honestly, ma'am, yung foundation na question na sinabi ko dito, yung 5 basic question, pansinin niyo po, what are the reasons? What are the assumptions? What? Alright? So, importante po kasi yun. Hindi lang po siya nabibigyan ng diin. Hindi lang po siya nabibigyan ng karampatang panahon sa loob ng paaralan, sa loob ng mga silid paaralan. Kasi nga sa dami ng mga dapat nating tapusin, nawawalan na ng panahon para bigyang pansin o bigyang diin yung kahalagahan ng mga tanong na to. Ano, bakit, saan, kailan, anong nangyari, etc. Napakahalaga po nun eh. Ang tawag ko po dun foundational structure of critical thinking. Yung foundational, ibig sabihin, alam mo saan hahanapin sa kwento o sa teksto yung sagot dun sa ano. Saan hahanapin sa teksto yung sagot sa paano nangyari. Hindi ho yan basta-basta na lang nangyayari na natutunan kung hindi naman ho na-expose yung isang bata o mag-aaral sa pagbabasa o hindi man siya binasahan ng magulang ng mga kwento habang siya ay lumalaki, yung toddler years, yung tinatawag natin 0 to 5 years old, na dapat yung nanay niya, ini-introduce siya sa mga kagandahan ng pagbabasa, paghasa ng pag-iisip sa pamamagitan ng pakikinig ng kwento, pagtatanong tungkol dun sa kwento, etc. Kung may panahon ka po, ma'am, kung marami naman po tayo ngayon mas stay sa bahay, at kung may anak ka po, hindi ko po alam yung eksaktong konteksto ng tanong mo, pero naniniwala ako na pag mas marami po kayong oras, mas marami kayong panahon para magamit yung lengguwahe o language, mas marami pong chance para ma-develop yung comprehension skill, mas madali na pong malaman kung ano pa yung mga pwede nyong itanong. Pero to start with, sa paninimula, kailangan po natin talagang bumalik dun sa importansya ng ano, kailan, bakit, sa paanong paraan, etc. Napakalaking tulong po nun, ma'am.
Okay, thank you po, Doc Glenn. Last question na po, pahabol po, in connection with the previous questions that I gave po from Miss Nora Sara. Do you agree that questions with how and why are relatively better than what?
Sa totoo lang, in all honesty, all the questions are equally important. One can never answer how and why without understanding really the whats and the whos and the entire thing about it, the simple basic things about it. The hows and whys are there as a higher level of to get and acquire higher level reasoning. But before you get to the higher level, usually we have to start from the bottom. And if the bottom is not that well founded, what happens is that maybe a bit hard for us to really get the right answers to the house, to what extent. And it happens in our graduate school. I once taught in the I've been teaching grad school, and oftentimes doing research is the most dreaded okay, moment of grad school. Why? Simply because asking question like to what extent we are not used of. We are not used of answering that. Why? Because hindi nga na, we were not trained to, really process whatever we read or whatever we're reading. Hindi siya naayos. So palagay ko, ma'am, to answer your question in all humility, lahat po ng questions are very important. Yung mga what, who, why, they are equally important. And there's no such thing as ito na lang ako mag-focus sa how and why or to what extent or to what in what degree, whatever. But equal po dapat siya. So depende rin po, allow me to say, very much dependent on the text that you guys are exploring. Kasi kung simple lang naman po yung teksto, hindi naman siya dapat gamitan. Or kung simple man yung teksto pero gusto mo siyang i-elevate in a higher ground, gagamitan mo po talaga. You will really use higher level questions like the house, etc. So, depende po sa endeavor that you would like to engage with. So, kung simple, if you are using a simple material or if you're using a difficult material. Alam niyo po ba, there's one particular research that they use difficult materials but they only and ask simple questions and then they were able to get something out of it. So what I'm saying is we can always explore, but let's not limit or let's not give a final way of looking at things. Kasi po, we're talking about human beings, we're talking about people who are capable of really creating something based on their interpretation, their analysis, etc. Kaya po yung image kanina na pinakita ko as I begin, I like to keep that in mind kasi hindi po pwedeng bigyan lang na I cannot limit one person to think only what I want him to think. Lalo na I'm raising kids, I'm raising students for the next generation. Mas maganda, mas maraming ideas, mas okay. So how? Give them different kinds of questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you po, Doc Glenn. So that's all the questions we have for now. And for our viewers, we'll be posting the link on where you can get a copy of Doc Glenn's PowerPoint presentation. Again, we would like to apologize if we weren't able to share it with you during the discussion. But for sure, we had a very... Yan.
Just like to ask, kung nakita kanina yung mga pinakita ko dito sa phone. Siguro naman nakita, no?
Medyo kita po, pero hindi po siya ganun ka-clear po, Doc Glenn.
Anyway, so, Ma'am Mitch, kindly just post wherever.
Yes po, no problem po. Yes po, no problem.
Maraming salamat po, Ivan. Maraming salamat, Ma'am Mitch, and to other guys who help us out. And again, sorry, apologies that I wasn't able to show what I prepared for. It broke my heart, but the show must go on, di ba? Sabi nga nila, Mitch. Bye-bye.
Yes, true po. Thank you po, Doc Glenn. So there we have it. So in behalf of the Ball Group, I would like to thank you, Doc Glenn, for this very inspiring, insightful, and comprehensive learning session. It is always an honor to have you in our learning session po. And to our Karibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Muli, maraming salamat and magandang araw po sa atin lahat. Goodbye po!